I had the good fortune to experience a classic World of Warcraft server recently. There are a fair few classic servers, but rarely are they as well run and true to the original game as this one. By comparing classic with the latest game, which we'll call WoD after the latest expansion, you can see a lot of design flaws that go some way to explaining why people want to play classic and why people are not interested in WoD. So why was I lucky to experience the classic game? Blizzard, the developer behind World of Warcraft, only run the latest version of the game and provide no means to play old versions of the game. As it stands, old versions of WoW are like artworks that are kept in storage, should never be put on display. At least not legally. It's only reasonable to see that WoD has moved on a great deal. But I would argue that the spirit of the beast has been lost. I'd argue that you can compare the two games from a game design perspective and prove that it is reasonably flawed. I think the original design was a complex, asymmetrical MMO that was focused around socialising. The asymmetry comes in the form of player classes. There's only so much that one player can do before he needs another to help. Additionally, two people working together is far more powerful than two separate people working alone. Classic was almost never a single player game. It was purposefully very easy and necessary to join in with others. And as for complexity, it was not an easy game to master. It didn't want you to sleepwalk through any single moment. It was designed to make your character's progression an achievement. Those three facets make up the spirit of the game that is dead. So in the intervening years, before we talk about what's changed for the worse, what's been improved? There are simple changes that no one could complain about: accessibility colouring, expanded options for sound, graphics and interface. Even the icons on the minimap are context sensitive. These are the kind of things you might call quality of life improvements. I'd lump them in a category that you could label, if it was already there, no one would notice. On the player mechanics side of things, there are now bucket loads of stats readily available about your character, detailing what each point in a new stat does for your character and detailing how they will change with a new item of gear. There was no way in Classic for me to know precisely what additional defense was doing for my tank. The current bucket loads of information you can get about your character is great. Quest design has become more dynamic, even if the quest givers still stand perfectly still with a bright yellow exclamation mark over their heads. This improved quest design is exampled in an early quest that is prompted by the appearance of a stealthed enemy. As I walked towards another quest, a shadowy figure revealed itself and slipped away again. Suddenly, I was prompted to take on the quest of reporting this back to the nearest town. It doesn't seem like much when I describe it now, but it's a small step to making the world feel more alive. There are small, beneficial, functional changes filed away into various parts of the game that do no harm but don't really change the core game experience. They are just iterative improvements that have accreted over so much time to be quite a lot of difference when you take a time machine back to Classic. But let me get to the design flaws that I feel are evident that WoD is provably no longer the game it originally was, the game that had more than 12 million subscribers, the game that has people breaking laws in order to play. The most obvious design difference in WoD is ease. Making things easy became a kind of poisoned chalice for Blizzard, and we can leave the easier combat and reduced player challenge out of this for now. The map and looking for group are two perfect examples. In Classic, the quest log was small, the map was big, and you couldn't look at both of them at the same time. When questing is mostly about the what and the where, this was a design problem. Merging the quest log and the map is a graceful solution in WoD, but then they went too far. Zones are marked out for quest objectives, and an arrow on your minimap tells you in no uncertain terms where to go. Suddenly, any critical thinking is reduced to nothing. Quests become mechanical, the player somehow gets removed from the equation. Head to arrow, kill enemy with tooltip, repeat. Looking for group is perhaps the best example of what you might call the beginning of the end, with garrisons being the nail in the coffin, according to a friend of mine that has actually played up to level 100. In Classic, finding groups was hard and it was a problem that needed a design solution, but the fix was much too powerful. An anonymous queuing window was added. When a group of 5 was matched together, the players are teleported straight to the entrance of the dungeon, where the landscape had to be traversed and players had to cooperate simply to arrange who would arrive to summon whom. Now you are summarily plonked at the beginning of a dungeon you may not have even been to yet, as unimmersive and detached as the fast travel feature in Skyrim. Had they restricted queuing access, perhaps making you clear the dungeon once by actually finding people and going to the dungeon via the world map, imagine the effort, it would have gone some way towards mitigating the ease of this system. It would have helped to support the social connections necessary for play. It would have additionally placed players of a similar progress level together, ideal to forge friendships for the next challenge on the journey. And this automated queuing system further mechanised players, turning them into automatons that perform their actions by rote. There are other smaller examples of where making things easy overstepped the line. In WoD, your character stats are extensive, and yet a gear rating mod was subsumed into the game, reducing all player value down to a single integer. It was flawed as a mod, and it's flawed as an official signifier. Player ability could not be communicated by this number, but it was common to be turned down for something you'd already accomplished based on lacking gear, despite that low gear being no impediment to you before. And this dehumanising of the player further detracts from the social value of interacting. Finally, on the topic of ease, character design started to be streamlined. Asymmetry in character abilities could often mean that one class was de facto the best of its class in healing or tanking. This is a design problem, an incredibly common one across many different types of multiplayer game, and it is completely understandable that Blizzard would want to fix it. Class balancing wasn't the same as homogenizing. At some point, abilities started to merge so that abilities across many classes were effectively the exact same thing. So, the game got easier, and with each little addition of ease, the social requirements of the game seemed to get discarded. In thin slices, the multiplayer part of MMO was being pruned, to the detriment of the entire experience, and heading away from the heart of the game as it was conceived. Another example that backs up my argument is the vestigial entities within the game. Now, not all of these are going to be negative, as 10 years of development work is layered onto a program. Some things will be retired but not removed. But coming to the game with no prior knowledge can be a very strange experience. I couldn't help but notice that my mana bar is redundant in WoD. Playing a priest, I got to level 21 without being able to die, short of jumping off something high, and without being able to run out of mana. In truth, I cast a spell at every enemy within range and they invariably died from it without any further effort on my part. The spell in question is a damage over time spell, but the mana cost for it is both non-existent and refunded by the time it can be cast again, 1.5 seconds later. New players must be wondering what the point is and why there are vendors that sell food and water, once essential for replenishing resources outside of combat. These are vestigial stumps that indicate a lack of care, but they're truthfully just small facets of the greater vestigial trait. Levelling. Pre-orders of the next expansion, Legion, come with an option to have a character promoted directly to level 100, ready to hit the new content as soon as it is out. Levelling was a huge and fantastically enjoyable part of Classic, and it is something you are fired through on solid rocket boosters in the current game. By the time my priest was level 19, I had levelled beyond many areas that would once have been necessary content. I could just skip whole sections of the game. Because Blizzard is simply tired of making the effort to keep them relevant, to keep them interesting, it interferes with balancing the endgame, and that's all they're interested in catering for. When you can skip the game to play the game, something is wrong. The complexity has left. There is no longer any socialising needed to play. The challenge of progressing your character has been excised, with the inclusion of homogenised classes, the lack of difficulty, and the devaluing of powerful gear. And the value of achievement has completely died. Once there were epic items in World of Warcraft, and they were epic, but no longer. Those first legendary items are still legendary. Thunder Fury still makes people excited to this day. In Mists of Pandaria, a legendary cloak was just standard for all players. Today, the game languishes because all that it once was, all that once made it the biggest game ever, has been forsaken, discarded and forgotten. Now, I don't know how to finish this particular essay without going on to argue for Blizzard to open the gates, permit players of all types to go back and see for themselves what started this huge enterprise. Currently, people go to great labours of love to provide illegal servers to access it, like keeping certain books in Nazi Germany or listening to American propaganda rock music in the Soviet era. It deserves to be there, to be experienced. Game designers can learn from it, old players can have their nostalgia fix, new players can see what all the fuss was about, and the hardcore can have another chance at Thunder Fury. but most importantly, communities can be forged and friends can be made.